After my son's funeral, she hissed, "The 50 million will be mine. You won't get anything." People froze in shock, but I just smiled. She didn't know yet that her words were the beginning of the end. When the lawyer uttered those two fateful words, everything in the room changed. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The lilies were suffocating. Their sickly sweet smell filled the chapel at Henderson Funeral Home, mixing with the hushed murmur of voices I didn't want to hear. I stood at Derek's casket, my hand resting on the polished mahogany, studying my son's face one final time. They'd done good work. He looked peaceful. That was a lie, of course. Nothing about a 38-year-old man dying in a Tesla crash on I-95 at 2 in the morning was peaceful. 1 week, 7 days since the police called, 7 days since my world ended. The funeral director had positioned the casket perfectly, angled so mourners could file past, offer their condolences and move along, a production line of grief. I watched them come and go, Derek's colleagues from his law firm, old friends from college, neighbors from the Gables. They squeezed my shoulder, mumbled about tragedy and loss, and I nodded. My throat was too tight for words. Then I saw her. Jennifer stood near the back, wrapped in a black Chanel dress that probably cost more than the casket. Her makeup was flawless, foundation smooth, eyeliner sharp, lips painted a subdued wine color. Not a tear had touched that face, not one. She was whispering to her mother Susan, both of them leaning close like conspirators at a cocktail party. Susan wore pearls. Pearls. At my son's funeral, I turned back to Derek. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I tried to warn you." The service began. The funeral director guided everyone to their seats. I sat in the front row, alone. Jennifer took the second row, her choice, not mine. Throughout the eulogy, I felt her presence behind me like a cold draft. The minister spoke about Derek's accomplishments, his brilliance as an attorney, his generosity. All true, all meaningless now. I didn't turn around, but I heard her phone buzz. Twice, 3 times, then the soft tap of her thumbs on the screen. When the final hymn faded, guests began filing past the casket again. I stood, accepting embraces I didn't want, hearing words that slid past me like water. Then the crowd thinned. The funeral director touched my elbow gently, indicating it was time. Time to close the casket. Time to let go. I placed both hands on the mahogany edge. "I love you," I said quietly. Then I stepped back. That's when Jennifer approached. She moved through the thinning crowd with purpose, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Susan trailed behind her, that same smirk playing at her lips. I watched them come, measuring their expressions. Jennifer's face held no grief, only irritation. She stopped 3 feet from me, arms crossed. "You could have at least booked a better venue," she said. Her voice carried across the room. Derek deserves something more than this budget funeral home. I felt my jaw tighten. Around us, remaining guests froze mid-conversation. The air grew thick. "I organized everything," I said. My voice was steady, factual. "I paid for everything. You couldn't even manage that much." Her eyes flashed. "I was grieving Robert. Unlike some people, I actually loved my husband." The accusation landed like a slap. I said nothing. What could I say? That I'd noticed her dry eyes? That I'd heard her phone buzzing during the eulogy? That grief looked different on someone who'd actually lost something. Susan moved closer to her daughter, her hand touching Jennifer's elbow in a gesture of support. "Poor Jennifer," she said, loud enough for the remaining guests to hear. "She'll finally get what she deserves after putting up with all this." I looked at Susan, really looked at her. The satisfaction in her eyes was unmistakable. Jennifer took a step closer. Now we were 2 feet apart. "Don't think you're in charge here," she said. Her voice dropped, but the steel in it sharpened. "Everything will change very soon." My hands formed fists at my sides. I didn't raise them, didn't move, just stood there, returning her stare, letting the silence stretch between us. She waited for a response. When none came, she turned on her heel and walked away, Susan following like a shadow. I watched them exit through the chapel doors, watched them disappear into the parking lot beyond. The funeral director approached cautiously. "Mr. Gray, we're ready to transport to the cemetery whenever you are." I nodded, but I didn't move immediately. I stood there, Derek's casket behind me, Jennifer's words echoing in my mind. Everything will change very soon. She thought I didn't understand. She thought I was just a grieving old man, too broken to see what was coming. But I'd watched her for 5 years. I'd seen how she looked at Derek's assets, how she spent his money, how she cataloged everything he owned like items on a shopping list. I gripped the edge of the pew in front of me, feeling the wood press into my palms. The gathering would be at Derek's house, the $8 million mansion he'd bought, the house he'd built his life in. Jennifer's territory now. I'd have to walk through those doors, past her smirking mother, past her shallow friends, and endure whatever performance she'd planned next. I exhaled slowly, releasing the pew. The war was coming. She'd just declared it. And I was ready. Derek's house stood before me, all glass and white stone, reflecting the late afternoon sun. I'd helped him choose this place 3 years ago. We'd walked through the empty rooms together, him talking about the future, about filling it with family, with children. Now it felt like a mausoleum. Cars lined the circular driveway. The valet Jennifer hired, a valet for a funeral reception, took my keys without meeting my eyes. I walked through the front door alone, my hand brushing the doorframe Derek had installed himself. He'd insisted on doing it personally, wanting to put his own mark on the house. The entryway held arrangements of white roses and lilies, transplanted from the funeral home. Their smell followed me inside. Guests clustered in the living room beyond, voices a low hum of forced conversation. I moved through them, accepting brief condolences, nodding at faces I recognized. Then I heard her laugh. Jennifer stood in the center of the living room, phone pressed to her ear, surrounded by 3 of her friends. Designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, champagne flute in her free hand. "I'm thinking the new Herm Dawes Kelly bag," she said onto the phone. Her voice carried across the room. "The funeral's almost over anyway, such a drag." "Yes, the burgundy one. I'll text you the link." I stopped walking, stood perfectly still, watched her gesture with the champagne glass, watched her friends nod and smile, watched her treat my son's funeral reception like an interruption to her shopping schedule. A waiter passed with a tray of drinks. I took one, whiskey, neat, and moved to the windows overlooking Derek's garden, the garden he'd planted himself. Native palms, bird of paradise, a small fountain he'd bought at an estate sale in Coconut Grove. I remembered helping him install it, both of us sunburned and laughing. "Derek was a good man," someone said beside me. I turned. An older gentleman, someone from Derek's firm. "He spoke of you often." "Thank you," I managed. "He was my pride." The man nodded and moved away, leaving me alone again with my whiskey and my memories. 5 years ago, Derek brought her home for the first time. I watched her eyes catalog everything in my house, the paintings, the furniture, the watches on my dresser. "Dad, I'm in love," Derek said. I tried to warn him. He wouldn't hear it. 3 months later, they were married in a ceremony that cost more than my first car. Susan moved in with them a year after that, claiming she needed help after her divorce, help that involved living rent-free in Derek's guest house. "Robert," Susan's voice cut through my thoughts. I turned slowly. She stood 3 feet away, that same smirk from the funeral still playing at her lips. She held a plate of cannap, picking at them delicately. "Robert," she repeated, stepping closer. Her voice took on a saccharine quality. "When Jennifer gets what's rightfully hers, maybe you can visit the grandchildren sometimes. If you behave properly, of course." The grandchildren, the ones that didn't exist, the ones Jennifer had postponed for 5 years, always saying she wasn't ready, that Derek's career came first, that there was plenty of time. Now I understood. She'd never wanted Derek's children, just his money, just his house, just everything he'd built. I looked at Susan steadily, saying nothing. Let her fill the silence. Let her show me exactly who she was. "Of course, that depends on whether you're reasonable," she continued. "Jennifer's been through so much. She deserves to move forward without interference from people who don't understand their place." My hands tightened around the whiskey glass. The ice clinked softly. I took a slow sip, tasting nothing, and continued to stare at her. Susan's smile faltered slightly. She'd expected a reaction, anger, pleading, something. Instead, I gave her nothing, just watched her squirm in the silence she'd created. Well, she said finally, I suppose we'll see how things unfold tomorrow. Tomorrow. The will reading. The lawyer, Derek's lawyer, Arthur Patterson, had called 3 days ago. Tomorrow at 10. His office in downtown Miami. Jennifer would be there. Susan, too, probably. Both of them expecting their payday. Susan walked away, disappearing into the cluster of guests near the bar. I turned back to the window, back to Derek's garden. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the fountain. Around me, Jennifer's friends laughed too loudly. Someone turned on music, soft jazz that felt obscene in its cheerfulness. More champagne appeared. The caterers moved efficiently through the room, treating this like any other event, any other party in any other mansion. But it wasn't. My son was dead, and these people were celebrating his estate before he was cold in the ground. I moved through the house, away from the crowd, down the hallway to Derek's study. The door was closed. I opened it quietly and stepped inside, closing it behind me. His desk sat beneath the window, exactly as he'd left it. Legal pads stacked neatly, pens in a marble holder, a photograph of us from 2 years ago, fishing off Key Largo. Both of us sunburned and grinning. I picked up the frame, ran my thumb across the glass. I'm going to fix this, I said to the photograph. Whatever she's planning, whatever she thinks she's won, I'm going to make this right. The door opened behind me. I set down the frame and turned. A young woman stood there, one of Derek's paralegals. Mr. Gray? I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say Derek was the best mentor I ever had. He changed my career. Thank you, I said. That means a great deal. She nodded and left, closing the door softly. I stood there a moment longer, surrounded by Derek's things, breathing in the faint scent of his cologne that still lingered. Then I returned to the gathering. Jennifer was still holding court in the living room. Susan had rejoined her, both of them laughing at something on Jennifer's phone. Neither looked up as I passed. Neither acknowledged my presence at all. I walked to the window again, looking out at the garden as the last light faded from the sky. My jaw tightened. My hands remained steady at my sides. They thought they'd won. They thought tomorrow would bring them everything. Jennifer with her smirks and her shopping lists. Susan with her veiled threats and her certainty. Let them think it. Let them celebrate. Let them reveal exactly how far their greed extended. The lawyer had scheduled the will reading for tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Patterson's office, 20th floor of the Brickell Tower. I would be there. I would watch. I would wait. And when the moment came, when they finally understood what Derek had actually planned, I would remember this day. I would remember their laughter, their champagne, their absolute certainty that they'd gotten away with everything. Patience. That's what Derek used to say when he worked a case. Patience and precision. Let them make their mistakes. Let them show their true selves. I took a final sip of whiskey and set the glass on the windowsill. Tomorrow would be interesting. The elevator climbed 40 floors. Through the glass walls, Miami spread below like a grid of ambition and money. I watched the financial district shimmer in the mid-morning heat and wondered if Derek had stood in this same elevator 3 months ago, rehearsing what he'd tell Warren Phillips. The doors opened onto polished marble. Phillips and Associates occupied the entire floor. Glass partitions, leather furniture, the sterile atmosphere of serious wealth. The receptionist recognized me immediately. Mr. Gray, Mr. Phillips is expecting you. Conference room 3. I followed her down a corridor, lined with abstract art that probably cost more than my first house. The conference room overlooked Biscayne Bay. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the long mahogany table. Jennifer was already there. She sat with her back to the view, Susan beside her, both dressed like they were attending a charity luncheon. Jennifer wore cream Valentino. Susan had chosen navy Armani. They looked up as I entered, and Jennifer's expression transformed into something predatory. Robert! She didn't stand. How punctual. I took the chair across from her, placing my hands flat on the table. Neutral, calm, revealing nothing. Warren Phillips entered moments later, a legal assistant trailing behind him. Warren was silver-haired, late 50s, wearing a suit that whispered rather than shouted. He'd been Derek's attorney for 8 years. I'd met him twice before, once at Derek's wedding, once at a firm holiday party. Both times he'd struck me as competent and principled. He nodded at me. Just a brief acknowledgement, but something passed between us. Understanding, maybe, or confirmation. "Thank you all for coming," Warren said, settling into his chair at the head of the table. "We're here for the reading of the last will and testament of Derek Thomas Gray, deceased. I'll need everyone to confirm their presence for the record." He went around the table. Me, Jennifer, Susan, two of Derek's cousins I barely knew, Michael and Patricia, sitting quietly near the windows. They'd flown in from Chicago for the funeral and looked uncomfortable with the whole proceeding. Jennifer sighed dramatically. "I hope this won't take long. I have a salon appointment at 2. Warren's expression didn't change. "The process takes as long as it takes, Mrs. Gray." "Well, let's get to the important part, then." Jennifer crossed her legs, her heel bouncing impatiently. "We all know how this goes." Susan leaned over, whispering something. Jennifer smiled, that same self-satisfied expression from the funeral, from the reception, the look of someone counting money that wasn't hers yet. Warren opened the folder before him. Inside, presumably, was Derek's future, or what Jennifer thought was her future. "The will was executed 3 months ago," Warren began, "properly witnessed and notarized according to Florida state law. I'll begin with the preliminary sections." His voice settled into that formal cadence lawyers use when reading legal documents. I half listened to the opening language, standard declarations about sound mind and legal capacity. My gaze drifted to Jennifer. She wasn't listening either. Her fingers drummed on the table, her eyes on the folder, like a cat watching a bird. 3 months ago, the phrase echoed in my mind, pulling me backward. Late June. Derek had shown up at my house after 10 at night. I'd been reading on the terrace, enjoying the breeze off the bay. The doorbell startled me. "Dad?" Derek had looked troubled when I opened the door. Not frightened, exactly. Determined. "Can we talk?" We'd sat on the terrace. I'd poured us both bourbon. Derek stared at his glass, turning it slowly between his hands. "I did something important today," he'd said finally. "Something I should have done a long time ago." "What kind of something?" He'd looked at me then, his expression serious. "Dad, I want you to know, whatever happens, I always remember how much you've done for me. Everything. The sacrifices you made when Mom died, putting me through law school, being there when I needed guidance. Son, what are you talking about? Is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." But his voice held an edge I couldn't place. "I just wanted you to know, that's all." I'd pressed him, but he'd deflected, changed the subject to a case he was working on. Left an hour later with a hug that lasted longer than usual. I hadn't understood then. "Total estimated value of all assets," Warren was saying, pulling me back to the present. "Before we proceed to the distribution, I'll read the complete inventory." Jennifer straightened slightly. This was what she'd been waiting for. Warren adjusted his reading glasses. "Residential property located at 4725 Alhambra Circle, Coral Gables, Florida. Current appraised value, $8 million. Jennifer's smile grew. "Vehicles," Warren continued. "Ferrari 488 GTB, Range Rover Sport, autobiography, Tesla Model S Plaid. Combined estimated value, $1,200,000. Susan squeezed Jennifer's hand. The gesture was quick, conspiratorial. "Bank accounts at Chase, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America. Investment portfolios through Morgan Stanley and Fidelity. Stock holdings in various companies. Retirement accounts." Warren paused, scanning the document. "Total liquid assets, approximately $48,700,000. The room felt smaller suddenly. The numbers hung in the air like physical objects. Michael cleared his throat softly. Patricia shifted in her seat. Even the legal assistant's pen had stopped moving. Jennifer leaned forward. Her expression had transformed into something rapacious, hungry. She turned slowly toward me, and when she spoke, her voice dripped with venom. "50 million will be mine. You get nothing." Her eyes glittered. "Time for you to understand your place, old man." Susan giggled, actually giggled, like a teenager at a sleepover. Michael and Patricia recoiled visibly. The legal assistant's face went carefully blank. I didn't move, didn't flinch. My hands remained flat on the table, my breathing steady. I simply looked at Warren, and a small smile touched my lips. Warren's eyes met mine across the mahogany expanse. A moment of silent communication passed between us. Acknowledgement, readiness. I spoke quietly, almost casually. Should I tell them, or would you prefer to? Jennifer's head snapped toward me, confusion flickering across her face. What? Warren nodded slightly. Then he looked down at the document, found his place, and continued reading. All aforementioned property and assets, he said, his voice clear and formal. I, Derek Thomas Gray, bequeath to my father, Robert William Gray. Silence, complete, crushing silence. I watched Jennifer's face cycle through emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, comprehension, horror. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then she screamed. What? Jennifer's voice shattered the silence like glass exploding. She lunged forward, her hands slamming onto the table. That's impossible. He couldn't. I'm his wife. Warren remained perfectly still, his finger marking his place in the document. Mrs. Gray. No. Jennifer snatched the will from Warren's hands, her eyes racing across the pages. This is wrong. There's a mistake. Where does it say? Where does... She flipped pages frantically, her perfectly manicured nails scraped against the paper. Susan leaned over, reading desperately alongside her daughter. This can't be legal, Susan said, her voice high and thin. She's his spouse. She has rights. You can't just... Warren extended his hand calmly. Mrs. Gray, if I could have the document back, please. Jennifer clutched it tighter. I want my own lawyer. This is fraud. This is... The will was properly executed, Warren said, his tone patient but firm. 3 months ago in this office with 2 witnesses present and a notary. All legal requirements under Florida law were met. But I'm his wife. Jennifer's face had gone from white to red, fury replacing shock. Spouses have protections. You can't just cut me out. Warren retrieved the document from her shaking hands. He turned to a specific page, his finger tracing a paragraph. Prior to your marriage, Mrs. Gray, you signed a prenuptial agreement. That agreement clearly delineates separate property rights. All assets Mr. Gray brought into the marriage, and all assets he acquired during the marriage, were designated as his separate property. Jennifer stared at him. The prenup was just paperwork. Derek said it was standard. He said, the prenup is legally binding, Warren continued. It specifies that in the event of Mr. Gray's death, his separate property passes according to his will, not according to spousal inheritance laws. You signed it. Your attorney reviewed it. You acknowledged understanding its terms? 5 years ago, Jennifer's voice climbed higher. I signed that 5 years ago. I wasn't... The terms haven't changed, Mrs. Gray, and they remain enforceable. Susan stood abruptly. This is theft. You're stealing from my daughter. That money should go to his widow, to his family. I am his family, I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. I'd remained seated, my hands still folded on the table, watching the collapse of their expectations with something like satisfaction. Jennifer's gaze locked onto mine. Pure hatred radiated from her. You did this. You poisoned him against me. You turned him... I did nothing, I said. Derek made his own choices. He couldn't... Jennifer's voice broke. Not with grief, with rage, with the fury of someone watching $50 million disappear. That house is mine. Those cars are mine. I've lived there for 5 years. I decorated it. You spent his money, I interrupted, my voice still calm. That's not the same as earning it. Jennifer's face contorted. I'll sue. I'll contest this will. I'll fight you in every court in Florida until... Try, I said. One word. That's all it took. One word delivered with absolute certainty. Jennifer froze. Something in my tone, in my expression, must have reached her. The futility of it, the impossibility of winning. But she wasn't ready to accept defeat. Not yet. My lawyers will tear this apart, she hissed. There are ways to challenge a will. Undue influence. Mental incompetence. I'll prove Derek wasn't in his right mind when he was perfectly competent, Warren said. I can attest to that personally. So can both witnesses. Additionally, Mr. Gray provided a detailed video statement explaining his reasoning. It's part of the permanent record. That stopped her. Video? Recorded the same day he signed the will, explaining his decision, confirming his mental capacity, addressing potential challenges. Warren's tone remained professional, but I detected a hint of satisfaction. It's quite thorough. Jennifer's eyes darted between Warren and me. I want to see it. That can be arranged, Warren said, though I should warn you the contents are explicit regarding his motivations. I don't care. I want... He knew, I said softly. Derek knew everything, Jennifer. Who you were, what you wanted, why you married him. Her face went pale again. You don't know anything about our marriage. I know enough. I stood slowly, deliberately, looked down at her across the table. I know my son saw through you eventually. I know he made sure you'd get exactly what you deserve. Which is nothing, Susan shrieked. You're leaving her with nothing. The prenup allows for one provision, Warren said, consulting the document. Mrs. Gray is entitled to retain her personal property, clothing, jewelry, items purchased specifically for her use. But the residence, vehicles, and all financial assets revert to Mr. Robert Gray as primary beneficiary. Jennifer's hands clenched into fists. I'll fight this. I'll drag you through court for years. I'll make you spend everything on legal fees until... Go ahead, I said. Spend your own money hiring lawyers. Spend years tied up in litigation. Lose every motion, every appeal. The will is ironclad. Derek made sure of it. I moved toward the door. Or you can accept reality and move on. This isn't over, Jennifer spat. I'll find a way. I'll prove... I turned back to her one last time. My son was a brilliant attorney, Jennifer. One of the best. Do you really think he'd leave any loopholes? Any openings for you to exploit? I paused. He knew you'd try. He prepared for it. Warren began gathering his papers. If there are no further questions, I believe we're concluded. Mrs. Gray, you'll need to vacate the property within 30 days. That's standard under Florida law when... 30 days? Jennifer's voice cracked. Where am I supposed to go? That's not Mr. Gray's concern, Warren said simply. However, the will does provide for a transition period. You have 30 days to remove your personal belongings and arrange alternative housing. Susan grabbed Jennifer's arm. Call Marcus. Call our lawyer. We'll fight this. We'll... But Jennifer wasn't listening anymore. She stared at me with something beyond hatred, beyond rage, a kind of disbelief that her carefully constructed plan had imploded so completely. I held her gaze for a long moment. Then I turned toward the door. Behind me, Jennifer was screaming something about courts and appeals and justice. Her voice grew shrill, desperate. Susan's higher-pitched protests layered over it. I didn't look back. Warren would handle the details, the paperwork, the logistics of transferring everything to my name. That was his job, and he was good at it. I walked down the corridor, past the abstract art, past the receptionist who carefully avoided eye contact. The elevator doors opened immediately. As they closed, I heard one final scream from the conference room, muffled by distance and glass, then silence. The elevator descended. Through the glass walls, Miami spread out below. My city now, Derek's city. The city where my son had built his life, made his fortune, and, in his final act, ensured justice. The doors opened onto the lobby. I stepped out into the air-conditioned coolness, adjusting my jacket. Outside, the heat hit like a wall. I walked to my car, got in, and sat for a moment, with my hands on the wheel. $50 million. $8 million in real estate. Everything Derek had worked for. Everything he'd built. All mine now. Not because I wanted it, not because I'd asked for it, but because my son had seen clearly, perhaps for the first time, exactly who he'd married, and he'd acted accordingly. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking garage. Jennifer would call her lawyers. She'd threaten and rage and plot. But Warren was right. The will was ironclad. Derek had made sure of it. 3 months ago, he'd sat on my terrace and told me he'd done something important. Now I understood. Now I knew. And now the real battle would begin. Miami heat hit me like a wall when I stepped out of Warren's building. 40 floors above, Jennifer was probably still screaming. I loosened my tie and walked to my car. The drive home to Coconut Grove took 30 minutes through midday traffic. I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't need distraction. My mind was already working through Jennifer's next moves, calculating timelines, anticipating her strategy. She would hire an attorney. Probably today. She would contest the will. Definitely. She would claim mental instability, undue influence, spousal rights, whatever legal fiction her lawyer could construct. I'd expected all of it. My phone started ringing that evening. The first call came from Michael Chen, who ran a pharmaceutical supply network I'd worked with for years. Robert, thought you might want to know. Jennifer Gray just walked into Wright and Associates. Marcus Wright himself took the meeting. Thank you for the heads up, I said. Marcus Wright, one of Miami's most expensive estate litigation attorneys. Jennifer was moving fast, throwing money at the problem. Derek's money, technically, though she'd probably emptied whatever joint accounts she could access before the banks froze them. The next morning, another call. This one from Elena Rodriguez, who owned a luxury furniture store in the design district. Your daughter-in-law just ordered a moving truck, Elena said. Big one, scheduled for tomorrow morning. I thanked her and hung up. So Jennifer was evacuating Derek's house, taking whatever she could before the 30-day deadline. Smart, actually. Material possessions she could claim as gifts or joint property. Small victories while she prepared the larger battle. I drove past Derek's mansion that afternoon. The moving truck sat in the circular driveway, its back door open. I slowed, watching from across the street. Jennifer stood on the front steps directing two movers carrying a leather sofa. Susan hovered beside her, clipboard in hand. They were systematic about it. Furniture, artwork, decorative pieces. Anything not bolted down, I didn't stop them. Didn't intervene. Let them have their sofas and paintings. The real assets, the house, the cars, the $48 million, those weren't going anywhere. I drove home and waited. On the third day, August 19th, the doorbell rang mid-morning. A young man in a polo shirt stood on my doorstep, holding a manila envelope. Robert William Gray? Yes. I have legal documents for you. He handed me the envelope, had me sign for it, and left. I took the papers to my office. Derek's old office, actually, in the room where he'd done his homework as a teenager. His childhood desk still sat by the window. I'd kept it all these years, refinished it, used it myself. I opened the envelope and spread the documents across the desk. Complaint to contest will. Jennifer Gray, plaintiff. Robert Gray, defendant. I read through the legal arguments. Mental instability. Derek allegedly suffering from depression, making irrational decisions. Undue influence. I'd supposedly manipulated my grieving son. Spousal elective share under Florida law. She claimed entitlement to 30% of the estate, regardless of the will. Standard arguments. Desperate arguments. I reached the final page and smiled. Then I picked up my phone and dialed Warren's number. Warren Phillips. Time for Plan B, I said. I'll prepare the response. Warren replied immediately. When should we meet? Tomorrow morning, but first, I need to remember something. I hung up and sat back in Derek's chair, the lawsuit papers scattered before me. Undue influence. The phrase echoed in my mind, pulling me backward 2 months. Derek had shown up at my house late one evening, long after sunset. I'd been reading on the terrace when the doorbell startled me. Dad! Derek's face had been gray, hollow. Can we talk? We'd sat on the terrace. I'd poured bourbon for both of us. Derek stared at his glass like it held answers. Dad, I think Jennifer's cheating on me. The words had hung in the humid air. I hired a detective, he continued. I'm waiting for the report. But I know. I can feel it. I'd reached across, gripped his shoulder. Son, whatever happens, I'm here. We'll get through this. He'd nodded, but the pain in his eyes had been unbearable. A week later, he'd returned. Same terrace, same time of night. But his expression had changed. Still devastated, but harder, determined. It's confirmed, he'd said, his voice hollow. She's with Brian, my partner, and my wife. The betrayal had been complete. Business and personal, intertwined and destroyed. Divorce her, I'd urged. Now, don't wait. I will, but I need to do this right. Through lawyers. Gather evidence. Protect what we built. He'd looked at me steadily. Everything we built, Dad. You helped me get where I am. I won't let her take that. Derek had wanted evidence. He'd wanted to do it properly, legally, methodically. And he had. Those detective reports existed somewhere. Derek had been thorough. His attorney would have copies, photographs, documentation, proof of Jennifer's affair with Brian Kelly. I looked down at Jennifer's lawsuit again. Mental instability, undue influence. She had no idea what evidence existed, no idea what Derek had documented before his death. No idea that her claims would crumble under scrutiny. But I knew. And more importantly, I could get more. Derek had started gathering evidence, but Jennifer had been careless since his death, moving quickly, hiring lawyers, making demands. Desperate people make mistakes. There would be more to find. More proof of who she really was. I picked up my phone and searched for the best private investigator in Miami. Warren had mentioned a name once during a casual conversation about a different case. Barbara Stewart. Experienced, discreet, thorough. I found her website, read her credentials. 25 years investigating fraud, adultery, financial crimes. Perfect. I dialed the number. She answered on the second ring. This is Barbara. Ms. Stewart, my name is Robert Gray. Warren Phillips gave me your name. I need someone thorough and discreet. Can we meet tomorrow morning? A pause. What's this regarding? Estate litigation. I need background on my former daughter-in-law. Complete background. Another pause, shorter this time. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Caf, Batio and Coconut Grove. You know it? I'll be there. Bring everything you have. Names, dates, locations. And Mr. Gray, my retainer is $15,000. That won't be a problem, I said. I hung up and looked out the window at the darkening sky. Jennifer wanted a court battle. She wanted to claim Derek was unstable, that I'd influenced him, that she deserved her share of his fortune. Fine. Let her file her motions and make her arguments. But this fight wouldn't be decided by who had the better lawyer or the more sympathetic story. It would be decided by facts, evidence, the truth about who Jennifer really was and what she'd done. And tomorrow, I would start gathering those facts. Derek had begun this process. Now I would finish it. For him. For justice. For everything we'd built together that Jennifer had tried to destroy. The caf in Coconut Grove was half empty when I arrived the next morning. I chose a corner table, back to the wall, facing the door. Old habits from decades of business negotiations. Barbara Stewart walked in exactly on time. She was shorter than I'd imagined, maybe 5'4", wearing dark slacks and a simple blazer. Her hair was steel gray, pulled back efficiently. She looked like someone who'd spent years noticing details others missed. She spotted me immediately, walked over without hesitation. Mr. Gray. She shook my hand firmly and sat down. Tell me what you need. No small talk, no preamble. I appreciated that. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were basic facts I'd compiled the night before. Jennifer's full name, birth date, Susan's information, Derek's business details. Jennifer Morrison Gray, I said. Married to my son for 5 years. He died 2 weeks ago. She's contesting his will. I need to know who she really is. Before Derek. During the marriage. Everything. Barbara opened the folder, scanned the contents. Background checks, financial records, current activities. All of it. I'll need 3 days for a comprehensive report. Maybe 4, depending what I find. She looked up. My fee is $15,000. Half now, half on delivery. I pulled out my checkbook, wrote the amount, handed it across. How thorough can you be? I have contacts in New York, where she's from, access to financial databases, sources in Miami's service industry, restaurants, hotels, places where people remember faces. She tucked the check into her blazer. If there's something to find, I'll find it. Good. She stood. I'll call when I have something. Don't call me during the investigation unless it's urgent. I work better without interruption. Then she was gone. The next 3 days crawled by. I met with Warren, reviewed the legal response to Jennifer's lawsuit. We scheduled the preliminary hearing for early September. Everything was moving forward according to procedure. But my mind kept circling back to what Barbara might find, what secrets Jennifer had buried, what evidence existed beyond Derek's detective reports. On the third afternoon, August 22nd, Barbara called. Mr. Gray, I'm finished. When can we meet? My home. 1 hour. Text me the address. She arrived carrying a leather portfolio thick with documents. I led her to my office, closed the door. She spread materials across Derek's old desk. Photographs, printed reports, bank statements, pages of handwritten notes. Your instincts were correct, Barbara said without preamble. Jennifer Morrison Gray is exactly who you suspected. She laid out the story methodically, each piece of evidence building on the last. Born in Queens, father disappeared when she was 10, just walked out, never came back. Mother worked 3 jobs trying to keep them afloat. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with Susan's sister and her kids. Tight quarters, no money. Barbara pulled out a photograph. Teenage Jennifer in a high school yearbook, thin and hungry looking. She was smart enough, Barbara continued. Got into community college, dropped out after a year, moved to Miami at 28. She laid out more photos. Worked as a hostess at Maria, that upscale Italian place on Brickell. Perfect hunting ground for wealthy men. Before Derek? I asked. Before Derek, there was Richard Stanton, real estate developer. Married 18 years. Barbara pulled out more documents. Jennifer dated him for 6 months. He left his wife, divorced, lost $4 million in the settlement. Jennifer moved on 3 months later. The pattern was clear. She met Derek at Club Live, South Beach, 5 years ago. Barbara showed me a timeline she'd constructed. 3 months later, married. Susan Morrison moved in 1 year after that, claiming she needed help after her own divorce. Her divorce was real? Real, but convenient. She'd been separated for 2 years before it finalized. Perfect timing to move into Derek's guest house. Barbara pulled out the photographs I'd been waiting for. Now the affair. These are from the past 6 months. I spread them across the desk. Jennifer and Brian Kelly at dinner in a Coral Gables restaurant, entering Kelly's apartment building together, embracing in his car in a parking garage. The timestamps ran from February through July, the last month of Derek's life. Ongoing for at least 6 months, Barbara said. Possibly longer. Kelly's married too, by the way. 2 kids in private school. I studied the photos. Derek had known, had suspected, confirmed, and begun preparing his response. The financial piece, Barbara said, pulling out bank statements. This is where it gets interesting. She laid out a pattern of transfers. Joint account Derek had set up for household expenses, regular deposits from Derek's business account, and systematic withdrawals to Jennifer's personal account. Started 18 months ago, Barbara explained. Small at first, 20,000, 30,000. Then it accelerated. 200,000 in January, 180 in March, 220 in May. She pointed to the highlighted totals. Approximately $2 million over the past year. Very systematic, very calculated. I studied the numbers. $2 million, drained methodically while Jennifer planned her exit or secured her position. Either way, it showed premeditation. Legally, she had access to the joint account, Barbara said, so the transfers aren't criminal, but they show intent, pattern, long-term planning. She was preparing, I said quietly. She was preparing, Barbara agreed. Whether for divorce or widowhood, I can't prove, but she was definitely positioning herself financially. I gathered the photographs, stacked them carefully. Evidence of betrayal, of calculation, of Jennifer's true nature laid bare across my son's childhood desk. There's one more thing, Barbara said. She pulled out a final document. Phone records. I have a source at the cellular company. Jennifer called Brian Kelly 73 times in the month before Derek's death. Some calls lasted over an hour. 73 times, while Derek was alive, working, building his firm, trusting his partner and his wife. You knew Derek, I said softly, speaking to the empty room. You saw what she was. You tried to protect everything we built. Barbara began gathering her materials back into the portfolio. This is all yours now, copies of everything. The originals are in my secure storage if you need them for court. Thank you. She paused at the door. Mr. Gray, whatever your son discovered about her, he was smart to document it. This woman, she shook her head. She's been running this play for years. Derek just happened to be the one who figured it out. After she left, I sat alone with the evidence spread before me. Jennifer's history, the poverty, the calculated climb, the pattern of targeting wealthy men, the affair with Brian Kelly, documented in photographs and phone records, the systematic financial extraction, $2 million moved while Derek was still alive, and behind it all, Derek's strategy, the detective he'd hired, the evidence he'd gathered, the will he'd changed 3 months ago, protecting everything from Jennifer's predatory behavior. My son had been devastated by the betrayal, but he'd channeled that pain into methodical preparation. He'd seen Jennifer clearly, perhaps for the first time, and acted to protect what mattered. Now that responsibility fell to me. I gathered the documents into a folder, organized them carefully. Tomorrow I would meet with Warren again. We'd prepare our response to Jennifer's lawsuit. But we wouldn't just defend Derek's will. We'd destroy Jennifer's credibility entirely. She wanted a court battle. She'd filed her complaint, made her claims about mental instability and undue influence. Now she would get her battle, but not the one she expected. The evidence was overwhelming. Photographs, financial records, phone logs, background showing a pattern of predatory behavior. Everything the judge would need to see Jennifer Gray for exactly who she was. I closed the folder and stood. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for early September. 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks to build our case. 2 weeks for Jennifer to believe she still had a chance. Let her believe it. Let her hire expensive lawyers and file her motions and make her arguments. When the hearing came, I would present the truth, and the truth would destroy her. I chose my navy suit, the one Derek had admired 3 years ago. Conservative, respectful. Appearance matters in court, not just to judges but to opponents. I wanted Jennifer to see that I took this seriously. The Miami-Dade County Courthouse rose 20 stories above downtown, all concrete and glass. I parked in the structure across the street, walked through morning heat that already felt oppressive. Inside, the lobby was marble and echoes, lawyers with briefcases, defendants looking nervous, families seeking justice or avoiding it, security checkpoint, metal detector, elevator to the 14th floor. Warren waited near the courtroom doors, 2 folders in his hands. He wore charcoal gray, his silver hair combed back, looking every bit the experienced attorney he was. Wright will argue undue influence and elective share, he said quietly. We counter with the prenup and medical competency. Stay calm in there. I will. We entered together. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the judge's bench elevated at the front. 2 tables faced it, one for us, one for them. Gallery seating held perhaps 20 people. Jennifer sat at the plaintiff's table with Marcus Wright beside her. The transformation was remarkable. Gone were the designer clothes, the Chanel and Valentino. Now she wore a simple dark dress, modest jewelry, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, a handkerchief clutched in one hand. The grieving widow costume. She was playing the part. Susan sat in the gallery behind her, also dressed conservatively. Both looked somber, appropriate, victimized. I took my seat beside Warren. Across the aisle, Jennifer glanced at me once, then looked away quickly, maintaining her performance. All rise! The judge entered. Middle-aged woman, dark robe, serious expression. She settled behind the bench, arranged papers, nodded to the bailiff. Court is in session. Case number 2025, CV 8847. Gray versus Gray, contesting last will and testament. Mr. Wright, you may proceed. Marcus Wright stood. He was younger than Warren, maybe mid-40s, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage used to. Confident, polished, everything Jennifer's money could buy. Thank you, Your Honor. His voice carried authority. My client, Jennifer Gray, was married to the deceased for 5 years. They built a life together. Under Florida Statute 732-201, she is entitled to an elective share of the estate, 30% minimum. The will executed shortly before Mr. Gray's death circumvents her legal rights and shows clear evidence of undue influence by the primary beneficiary, his father, Robert Gray. He gestured toward me, made it sound like I'd manipulated my grieving son. Mr. Derek Gray changed his will 3 months before his death. Wright continued, this radical change, cutting out his wife entirely, suggests someone convinced him to act against his own interests and legal obligations to his spouse. Jennifer dabbed at her eyes with the handkerchief. Dry eyes, I noticed. Always dry. Wright spoke for 10 minutes, emphasized Jennifer's status as legal wife, the duration of their marriage, Florida's spousal protection laws, painted her as the victim of a manipulative father-in-law who wanted to keep everything in the family. It was a good performance. Professional. If you didn't know the truth, you might believe it. Thank you, Mr. Wright. The judge made notes. Mr. Phillips? Warren stood slowly. No dramatics, no grand gestures, just methodical competence. Your Honor, I'll keep this brief. First, the prenuptial agreement. He approached the bench, handed a document to the judge. Mrs. Gray signed this 1 month before the wedding. It clearly establishes separate property rights. In the event of divorce or death, Mr. Derek Gray's assets remain his separate property, distributed according to his will. The judge read through it carefully. Was Mrs. Gray represented by independent counsel when signing? She asked. Yes, Your Honor. We have documentation that Mrs. Gray retained her own attorney, who reviewed and advised her on the prenuptial terms. She signed voluntarily, with full knowledge of its implications. Warren laid another document on the evidence table. Second, Mr. Derek Gray's mental competency. Medical records from his physical examination 8 weeks before death. His physician certified him in excellent health, physically and mentally. No indication of depression, cognitive impairment, or susceptibility to undue influence. He presented more documents. Third, the will itself was properly executed. 2 witnesses present, both independent. Mr. Gray's regular attorney, not myself, but his business attorney of 7 years, oversaw the execution. Everything done according to Florida probate law. Warren returned to our table. The will is valid. The prenuptial agreement is enforceable. Mr. Derek Gray made his decision independently, competently, and legally. The judge reviewed the prenup again, asked questions about its terms, the timeline, Jennifer's legal representation. Warren answered each one precisely. Finally, she set down her pen. I need time to review all documentation thoroughly. I'm setting the next hearing for August 26th at 10 o'clock, 3 days from now. Both parties should prepare any supplementary evidence. Court is adjourned. The bailiff called us to rise. The judge exited. The formal proceedings ended. I gathered Warren's folders while he spoke quietly with the court reporter. Across the aisle, Marcus Wright leaned close to Jennifer, whispering urgently. Her subdued expression was cracking slightly, frustration showing through. People filed toward the exit. I followed Warren into the hallway, marble floors echoing with footsteps and conversation. Then Jennifer appeared beside me. Her face had transformed completely. The grief was gone. In its place, cold fury barely contained. You'll regret this, she hissed, quiet enough that only I could hear. I'll take everything that belongs to me. I looked at her steadily. See you in 3 days. She stared at me a moment longer, then turned sharply and walked back to where Susan and Marcus waited. Warren touched my elbow. Let's go. We walked to the elevator in silence, rode down to the lobby, stepped out into the heat. She thinks she has time, Warren said once we reached the parking structure. 3 days to regroup, find new arguments, hire more experts. She's wrong, I said. Warren smiled slightly. She's very wrong. Can you meet tomorrow morning? My office? What time? 8 o'clock. We have a counterclaim to file. I drove home through midday traffic, Jennifer's threat still echoing in my mind. She'd been so confident, so certain that her widow act and Marcus Wright's expensive arguments would overcome the prenup and proper legal procedure. 3 days until the next hearing. Jennifer thought she had time to prepare, to find weaknesses in our defense, to construct new strategies. She was wrong about that, too. That afternoon, Warren and I had different work to do. Not defensive preparation, offensive action. The evidence Barbara had gathered sat in my home office. Bank statements, photographs, investigation reports, and Derek's letter, his final testimony, written 1 month before his death. Tomorrow, we would prepare the counterstrike. And when we returned to court on August 26th, Jennifer would discover what real evidence looked like. Warren's conference table disappeared under documents. Bank statements covered one end. Photographs spread across the middle. Investigation reports stacked on the other side. And there, in the center like a beating heart, Derek's letter. This ends it, Warren said, picking up the letter carefully. This ends everything. I'd arrived at his office at 8 that morning. We had 2 days before the next hearing, plenty of time to prepare the counterclaim and file it. Warren pulled up a blank legal document on his computer. We're alleging 3 things. First, embezzlement of marital assets. The systematic withdrawals total $2 million over 14 months. That's not incidental spending. That's calculated extraction. I picked up the bank statements Barbara had obtained. Each highlighted transfer told the story. $20,000 in March of last year, $50,000 in April. The amounts grew larger as time passed. 200,000 in January, 180 in March, 220 in May. Second, Warren continued typing, marital infidelity. Under Florida law, that affects property rights in the context of a prenuptial agreement. She violated the marriage terms. The photographs lay before us. Jennifer and Brian Kelly outside a restaurant on Brickell Avenue, April 15th. Entering his apartment building in Coral Gables, May 3rd. Embracing in his car, June 20th. Sitting close at an outdoor cafe, July 8th. 3 weeks before Derek died. Barbara had been thorough. Each photo was time-stamped, geotagged, irrefutable. Third, Warren said, we're demanding restitution, $2 million plus interest, returned to the estate. He typed for another hour while I reviewed everything one more time. Derek's letter I read 3 times, my son's words heavy with pain and clarity. I have discovered my wife's infidelity with my business partner, Brian Kelly. Investigation confirmed my suspicions. I must protect the family assets my father and I built over decades. Jennifer married me for financial gain. This is now obvious. This will ensure those assets remain with family who earned them. Derek had written this, signed it, had it notarized, delivered it to Warren's office for safekeeping, 1 month before he died. My son had seen Jennifer clearly, perhaps for the first time, and he'd acted. By early afternoon, the counterclaim was ready. We drove to the courthouse together, filed it with the clerk. Warren hand-delivered a copy to Marcus Wright's office downtown. He'll call me tonight, Warren said as we left Wright's building. Outraged, demanding we withdraw it, threatening sanctions. Will he? He'll try. But the evidence is legitimate. He can't make it go away. That evening my phone rang. Warren's name on the screen. Wright called, exactly as predicted. He's claiming the evidence is circumstantial, that Derek's letter doesn't prove undue influence in our favor. He's scrambling. What did you tell him? That we'll see him in court tomorrow morning. Nothing more to discuss. I slept well that night, better than I had since Derek's funeral. The next morning, August 26th, I met Warren outside the same courtroom. We arrived early. Marcus Wright was already there, looking less confident than 3 days ago. His expression was tight, controlled, but concern showed through. Jennifer sat at her table wearing another modest dress. But the widow performance was harder to maintain now. Her jaw was set, her eyes harder. She'd seen the counterclaim. She knew what was coming. Court convened. Same judge, same formal procedure. Mr. Phillips, you filed a counterclaim? Yes, Your Honor. We're alleging embezzlement of marital assets, marital infidelity affecting property rights under the prenuptial agreement, and seeking restitution of funds. We have substantial evidence to present. The judge nodded. Proceed. Warren stood, gathered the first set of documents. Your Honor, these are bank statements from the joint account Mr. and Mrs. Gray maintained for household expenses. I'd like to direct your attention to the highlighted transfers. He approached the bench, laid them before the judge. She examined each page carefully. These transfers span what period? She asked. 14 months, Your Honor, beginning small and escalating substantially. Approximately $2 million total, transferred from joint accounts to Mrs. Gray's personal account. The judge's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted, attention sharpening. The pattern is systematic, Warren continued, not random household expenses, calculated withdrawals, growing larger over time. Marcus Wright stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Gray had legal access to those accounts. Transfers between accounts aren't embezzlement. Mr. Wright, the judge interrupted, I'll hear your response after Mr. Phillips finishes presenting his evidence. Please sit. Wright sat. Jennifer whispered something to him urgently. He shook his head. Warren picked up the photographs. Your Honor, these document Mrs. Gray's relationship with Brian Kelly, Mr. Derek Gray's business partner. Multiple locations over a 6-month period during Mr. Gray's life. He passed them to the judge one by one. Restaurant, apartment building, car, cafe. Each photo labeled with date, time, location. The judge examined each carefully. Her expression remained professional, but her eyes moved between the photos and Jennifer with clear understanding. In the gallery, Susan Morrison had gone pale. Next, Warren said, is the private investigator's report. He handed over Barbara's comprehensive documentation. It establishes Mrs. Gray's history and pattern of behavior, including a previous relationship with a married businessman who subsequently divorced and lost substantial assets. The judge read through it, several minutes of silence while she absorbed the details. Finally, Warren picked up Derek's letter. Your Honor, this letter was delivered to my office by Derek Gray 1 month before his death. It was properly notarized and filed securely. I'd like to read it into the record. Proceed. Warren's voice remained steady, professional, but the words carried their own weight. I have discovered my wife's infidelity with my business partner, Brian Kelly. Private investigation confirmed my suspicions. I must protect the family assets my father and I built over decades through hard work and sacrifice. Jennifer married me for financial gain. This is now obvious to me. This will ensure those assets remain with the family who actually earned them. My father gave everything to help me succeed. I won't let someone who betrayed me take what we built together. Silence filled the courtroom. The judge examined the letter closely, checking the notarization, the date, Derek's signature. Mr. Phillips, you're stating this letter was filed with your office a month before Mr. Gray's death? Yes, Your Honor. I can provide documentation of receipt, secure storage, and chain of custody if needed. That won't be necessary. She set down the letter carefully. Mr. Wright? Response? Marcus Wright stood. His confidence from 3 days ago had evaporated. Your Honor, we request time to verify the authenticity of these documents. The photographs could be... Mr. Wright, the judge's voice was sharp, are you questioning the authenticity of notarized bank statements from major financial institutions, or suggesting these time-stamped, geotagged photographs are fabricated? No, Your Honor, but is there any question about the authenticity of a notarized letter filed with opposing counsel's office a month before the deceased's death? Wright's shoulders sagged slightly. No, Your Honor. At the plaintiff's table, Jennifer's face had cycled through shock, fury, and something approaching fear. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of the table. The judge made notes for several minutes. No one spoke. The only sound was her pen scratching paper. Finally, she looked up. I need tonight to review all evidence thoroughly and prepare my ruling. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock for my decision. Court is adjourned. The bailiff called us to rise. The judge left. The moment she was gone, Jennifer turned to Marcus Wright. How did they get those photos? How did they... It doesn't matter now, Wright said quietly. His voice held resignation. The evidence is legitimate. But we can appeal, right? We can... Mrs. Gray, we should discuss this privately. Warren packed our evidence back into folders methodically. I gathered my own materials, moving slowly, deliberately. Across the aisle, Jennifer and Marcus were in urgent, whispered conversation. Her performance had completely crumbled. No more grieving widow, just raw panic and anger. In the gallery, Susan Morrison sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. Whether from shame or fear of consequences, I couldn't tell. I stood. Warren closed his briefcase. We walked toward the exit together. Behind us, Jennifer's voice rose sharply, something about appeals and other lawyers. Marcus's lower voice responding, trying to calm her, explain reality. In the hallway, Warren stopped. Tomorrow morning, she'll lose everything. The will stands. The prenup is enforced, and we'll get the $2 million back, plus interest. Derek made sure of it, I said. He did. Your son planned this carefully, even knowing he wouldn't be here to see it through. Warren paused. That letter. His pain was in every word, but so was his determination. We walked to the elevator. Behind us, the courtroom doors opened. Jennifer emerged, Marcus beside her, Susan trailing. They moved in the opposite direction, toward a different exit. Jennifer didn't look back, didn't glance at me, just walked away quickly, her heels clicking on marble, her entire scheme collapsed behind her. I rode the elevator down with Warren in silence, stepped out into the lobby. Outside, Miami heat waited. 9 o'clock tomorrow, Warren said. The judge will make it official. I'll be there. I drove home through afternoon traffic. Tomorrow the judge would rule. The will would stand. Jennifer would be ordered to return the $2 million. Derek's strategy would be vindicated completely. But tonight, I just felt tired. Tired and sad for my son, for the pain he'd carried those last months. for discovering that the woman he'd loved had married him for money, for dying before he could divorce her and move on. At home, I sat in Derek's old room, his childhood desk, his books still on the shelves, photographs of him at various ages covering one wall. "We did it," I said to the empty room. "Just like you planned. She's lost." The room offered no answer, just silence and memories. Tomorrow would bring official victory, legal vindication, justice served. Tonight, I just missed my son. The courtroom felt different on the final day, heavier somehow, as if the building itself understood this was an ending. I took my seat next to Warren and watched Marcus Wright arrange papers at the opposite table. He moved like a man going through necessary motions. Jennifer sat beside him, dressed plainly again, but the widow performance had crumbled. She looked diminished, hollow. Gone was the calculated grief, the handkerchief, the bowed head. Now she just looked tired and beaten. "All rise." The judge entered, settled behind her bench. "Mr. Wright, do you have additional witnesses?" "Yes, Your Honor. Character witnesses for Mrs. Gray." 3 women testified over the next hour, friends of Jennifer's I'd never met. They spoke in careful generalities about devotion and love, about Jennifer being supportive and caring. Vague platitudes with no substance. Warren barely cross-examined. He'd ask a single question. "Can you give me a specific example?" None of them could. Their vagueness condemned them more effectively than any rebuttal. Then Wright made his final move. "Your Honor, I'd like to address the prenuptial agreement. My client signed under pressure, weeks before her wedding. She didn't fully understand the implications of—" "Mr. Wright," Warren interrupted, standing, "may I call a witness to address this point?" The judge nodded. Warren called Thomas Brennan, the independent attorney who'd represented Jennifer during the prenup signing. He was in his 60s, gray suit, professional demeanor of someone who'd testified many times. "Mr. Brennan, did you advise Mrs. Gray regarding her prenuptial agreement?" "I did. I spent 2 hours explaining every clause. She asked intelligent questions. She understood the terms completely." "Did she sign voluntarily?" "Absolutely. When she finished signing, she said, 'This is fine. We're not getting divorced anyway.'" Brennan glanced at Jennifer. Those were her exact words. Wright's prenup challenge collapsed instantly. The judge made notes. "Anything else, Mr. Wright?" "No, Your Honor." "Mr. Phillips?" Warren stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Brian Kelly." The name sent a ripple through the courtroom. Jennifer's head snapped up. Susan gasped audibly in the gallery. Brian Kelly walked to the witness stand like a man approaching execution. His hands shook as he was sworn in. He couldn't meet anyone's eyes. "Mr. Kelly," Warren began, his voice calm, "were you involved in a romantic relationship with Jennifer Gray during her marriage to Derek Gray?" "No, we were just friends." Warren picked up a folder. "Mr. Kelly, I have photographs placing you and Mrs. Gray in intimate situations over a 6-month period. I have phone records showing 73 calls between you and the month before Derek Gray's death. Would you like to revise your answer before committing perjury?" Brian's face drained of color. Silence stretched. "Then yes, we were involved." "For how long?" 6 months, maybe 7. "During which Derek Gray was alive and married to Mrs. Gray?" "Yes." Warren let that settle. "Did Mrs. Gray ever discuss her marriage with you?" Brian's voice dropped to barely audible. "Sometimes." "What did she say?" She complained. Said Derek was too focused on work, that he didn't understand her." "Anything else?" Brian looked down at his hands. "She said things would be better when Derek freed us." "Freed you how?" "Through divorce." His voice cracked. Or whatever." The courtroom erupted, gasps, whispered exclamations. The phrase, "or whatever," hung in the air like poison. "Order!" The judge's voice cut through the noise. "Mr. Kelly, you're saying Mrs. Gray discussed her husband freeing her through divorce or other means?" "Yes, Your Honor." "When was this conversation?" "About 3 weeks before Mr. Gray died." Jennifer had her head down, hands covering her face. Susan was crying openly in the gallery. The judge stared at Jennifer for a long moment. "Anything else, Mr. Phillips?" "No, Your Honor. The defense rests." Court adjourned for the day. As people filed out, Jennifer remained motionless at her table. Marcus Wright whispered urgently to her, but she didn't respond. I walked out with Warren. In the hallway, he said quietly, "Tomorrow, she loses everything." That night, I didn't sleep well. Not because of uncertainty. The outcome was clear, but because of what it all meant. Derek had suffered betrayal, gathered evidence, changed his will to protect what we'd built, then died before he could divorce Jennifer and move on. The next morning, the courtroom filled early. Everyone wanted to hear the final ruling. The judge entered carrying a thick document. She settled behind the bench, adjusted her glasses, and began reading. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, I find as follows. The last will and testament of Derek Thomas Gray was properly executed, witnessed, and notarized. Medical records establish that Mr. Gray was of sound mind and body when executing the will. No evidence of undue influence has been presented. The prenuptial agreement signed by Jennifer Gray is valid and enforceable. Mrs. Gray was represented by independent counsel and signed voluntarily with full understanding of its terms. She paused, looked directly at Jennifer. The evidence of marital infidelity and financial misconduct is overwhelming. Mrs. Gray systematically transferred $2 million from joint accounts to her personal account over 14 months. She engaged in an extramarital affair during the marriage. Her testimony and that of Mr. Kelly reveal a disturbing attitude toward her late husband. Jennifer gripped the table edge. Her knuckles were white. Therefore, I rule as follows. The will stands as written. Mrs. Gray is entitled to nothing from the estate except her personal property. She is ordered to return $2 million to the estate within 90 days. Failure to comply will result in criminal prosecution for embezzlement. Mr. Robert Gray is confirmed as sole beneficiary. This case is closed. The gavel struck once, the final. Jennifer made a sound, half sob, half gasp. She stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair, and rushed from the courtroom. Susan followed, crying. Marcus Wright gathered his papers with professional resignation. Warren began packing our documents. "It's over." "Yes." People filed out slowly. The judge retired to her chambers. The courtroom emptied. I remained in my seat, looking out the tall windows at Miami. The city continued, indifferent to justice, to loss, to everything that had happened in this room. I had won. Completely. Decisively. So why did I feel so empty? Warren called the next morning. "Jennifer won't appeal. She doesn't have the resources. It's over." "Thank you, Warren." Derek would have appreciated everything. That afternoon, Jennifer's email arrived. Subject, "I'm sorry." She apologized for her greed, admitted Derek deserved better, acknowledged what we'd built together. She was leaving Miami. I read it twice. Felt nothing. No anger, no forgiveness. Just exhaustion. I closed the laptop without responding. The following week, I met with my attorneys. $30 million creates the Derek Gray Memorial Foundation, I said, supporting young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The remaining $20 million expands the pharmacy business. Sell the mansion, proceeds go to the foundation. Too many painful memories in that house. Over the next month, I established the foundation. Derek's name would be attached to success stories. Young people building businesses, achieving dreams. I found a smaller apartment with an ocean view. On the balcony, I held a photograph of 6-year-old Derek, laughing on my shoulders. "Your memory is protected," I said to the empty air. "Your legacy lives on." By September, the foundation held its first event. 20 young entrepreneurs presented plans. A young woman thanked me afterward. "This changes everything, Mr. Gray." "Derek believed in people who work hard," I said. "Keep that dream alive." Jennifer left for New York, bankrupt from legal fees. Susan returned to her old apartment, working multiple jobs. Brian Kelly's business reputation was destroyed. Clients gone, firm failing. I felt no satisfaction in their suffering, just acknowledgement that consequences exist. The foundation became my purpose. I saw Derek in every ambitious young face. His absence remained, but his presence lived on through them. One evening on my balcony, watching the sunset, I spoke to Derek's photograph. "I miss you every day, but I am doing what you'd want, building something that matters." The legal victory hadn't brought him back. The money didn't matter. But the foundation honored him. That meant something. Derek's name attached to success. His values lived through action, his memory preserved through purpose. Not perfect closure, just life continuing, changed but moving forward. Justice served, legacy protected. A father honoring his son the only way he still could. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.